Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Shifting Happens Pit Stop. This is the quick hit episode where we discuss a burning F1 topic as it breaks, and there is none bigger at the moment than the impending departure of Liam Lawson from Red Bull Racing to be replaced by Yuki Tsunoda. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by Marshall and AJ. AJ, you weren't on the last episode when we kind of talked about this talks of Liam being replaced by Yuki in a switch to go to Racing Bulls. Your views on it?
Mhm. Honestly, you guys know from the get-go, I wasn't a fan of Liam being thrown into that seat this early on. It wasn't so much so that it was Liam who was going into the seat. It was more so he's new. He doesn't really have that experience to jump into that Red Bull seat currently. And it just goes to show that you can't expect someone like him who has been outperformed by Sonoda this early in his career to go in and jump into a Red Bull seat that's already problematic and expect him to get you what the team needs.
Yeah, no, exactly. Obviously, Marshall, I know you spoke at length about this, but now that the move is seemingly happening, given that all of the major publications you would expect to talk about it have spoken about it, what are your views now?
Well, obviously, I thought that Liam was ready, and I thought that he was the best choice. And I was actually kind of rooting for the guy to do well. So to see him struggle in those first two races, obviously, you realize the problem is pretty entrenched at Red Bull. Obviously, I was wrong, but I don't think the thought process about putting him in was flawed in the sense that we've seen drivers with no experience come in and succeed, like what Behrman did at Ferrari last year. It's just in a Red Bull, we don't see it. So, when Lawson jumped into, um, you know, whatever they were called then, AlphaTauri, I guess, um, in 2023, he looked great. He was right on the pace. So, he's done it before. So I was judging it based on the fact, in both 23 and 24, he jumped in and he was, right on the pace and not far off of Yuki. So, I felt like he would be able to jump in the Red Bull and do a reasonable job, at least as, competent as what Perez had been doing. And now we see that that's not the case, that Red Bull really is a whole different animal from any other car on the grid. I think that that's the only conclusion you can make because, even Behrman hopping into a Haas looked fine last year when Magnussen wasn't available. So it just looks like there's something fundamental with that Red Bull car that makes it extremely difficult for a new driver to hop in. And I don't envy Yuki. I would almost think that it is worse for him to be put in this position now because when you're at or AlphaTauri, I did it again, V carb, and you're, you know, in that position to overperform or beat the other Red Bull, it's only going to make you look good. Now, if you move over and you're slower than the guy you replaced in the car that you used to be in, then it kind of undermines that potential. The idea in everybody's mind is that you're overperforming that machinery, and then it turns out that it's actually the car, which we'll see how it goes. I think that Suzuka is an interesting case because obviously Yuki knows it very well, and Lawson knew it very well. So you don't get that direct comparison. Like maybe there was a big improvement coming for Lawson this weekend too, and we're not going to know. But we'll at least have a comparison of them both driving at a track they know. Liam in the V carb and Yuki in the Red Bull.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah, go on, AJ.
yeah, no, sorry. So here's the thing that I just wanted to like highlight of what Marshall was saying over there earlier. In regards to how the Red Bull are in terms as in or how the car is, I think that's really to their own doing. It's their own downfall because we have seen in the interviews and the way other drivers have spoken about it in the past. Horner himself has admitted it last year at some point where they were down to a fork in the road between two choices. They consciously chose to ignore what Checo's input was on the development direction of the car, and ended up making it even more sharp, making it even more undrivable. Credit to Max, but that's also Max's driving style and preference. And even though it's his own preference, over the last year and a half, he himself has said he has struggled in the car and not felt great in it. So why is it that big of a surprise when they were their own downfall? This entire situation in that second seat is entirely the doing of Red Bull and how they chose to continue the development in 2023.
Can I play devil's advocate on that one though?
Sure.
If you know that you're not going to win the constructors, like because your car is not as good as McLaren or Ferrari, and you know that even if you develop it in a way that takes away from the ultimate pace of the car but makes it more drivable, that you're not going to win the constructors anyway, would you not just throw all your eggs into the Max Verstappen basket and just try and win the drivers? Like it, in a certain sense, bailing on your second car makes sense if you still have a driver capable of winning the world championship. Now, do they in 2025? I don't know.
That's
In 2024, they definitely did. So I think it's justifiable.
that's
But now they're kind of stuck in the consequences of doing that.
Yeah, but don't you think that's a fundamental problem with the team? Like, if at the end of the day, your entire development was so far ahead of everyone else, you had 2 years to figure your shit out.
It depends on what your goal is, but yes,
Yeah, and
if
at
your
the same
goal is the
time,
constructors, but
that
if your goal is finishing like second in the drivers and
yeah,
second in the constructors, sure. But if your goal is drivers championship or bust, I can see why you would compromise. But then now you take the pain for that
yeah,
decision. And then you
yeah,
take the pain even more when Max leaves.
yeah,
That's
Here's the thing with it for me is that you've got a choice here. Do you listen to your at the time three-time world champion driver, or do you listen to the guy that's bombing it? Basically, you're going to listen to your world champion driver.
he wasn't though, Baxty. Initially, he wasn't. He was sure he was maybe like a 4/10 off of Max, but he wasn't bombing it. That first season and a half, he was still getting on the podiums.
I'm yeah, but the fork in the road came what some point in 2023.
Miami 2023.
Yeah, which is when Max had the race, wasn't it? When he
Yeah,
destroyed him, and but that's when I think the team would have looked at it and said, "Ah, Checo's no use," because he had pole, Max is down the field, and Max has mugged him off. And you're going to go for your world champion driver every single day of the week. Of course you are. You need to listen to him because he's the one
mm,
that's delivering you the results. He's the one that's delivering you the goods. So I understand why Red Bull did what they did. Um, but as Marshall said, they're now facing the consequences of that decision. And
and I don't think that it's like they're listening to Max and Max is saying, "Oh, I want this car to be pointier and I want it to be more impossible for anyone else to drive and I want it to be on a knife edge."
no,
They're not
no,
doing that. They're just looking
no.
at the stopwatch and they're
Yep,
saying, "Oh, when we do this, Max is faster. Oh,
yep,
when we do this, Max is even faster. Oh,
yeah,
well, let's just keep cranking on that, that train and Max keeps getting faster, keeps getting the most out of it."
yeah,
And then all of a sudden the gap between the first and second driver just starts ballooning. And
100%.
and then it's like you're just there's no conscious decision to favor Max. They're just following the stopwatch. And then they're watching as he gets faster or loses less time in the second half of last year when when they're basically salvaging the second half of the year to just clinch. You're losing less or you're gaining more against McLaren, and as you do that, Checo just drifts further and further away. Well, again, the goal is the drivers' championship. So sorry, Checo, you know. But now we're seeing just how bad the end result of that uh, chasing tenths on Max's car to the detriment of the second car really is. Um, but it's not like they made a conscious decision or that Max actually wants the car to behave this
No, no,
way.
no,
I'm
no.
sure he would love a more drivable car.
Yeah,
Like,
he has said it. He has said it. So like just to back you up on this and to clarify that I'm not saying this is what he wanted and he wanted the second seat to suffer. What I'm saying is that he himself has agreed that the car now is not as comfortable and it is pretty undrivable compared to what it was. My fault that I'm pinning this on at the end of the day is Horner and Co.
Yeah,
There's a reason. Sorry. Yeah,
isn't
I'll
it
just say this.
Vache more than anything?
Sorry.
Isn't it Pierre Vache though, more than anything?
Um, I don't know because like if you look at it right, it just goes into a situation of how dire the situation Red Bull is right now because they've bungled such a big fork in the road. Number one, number two, a lot of their head engineers have left and or are leaving.
yeah. I mean, let's not forget it was around this time last year, or around Miami last year, when Newey says he's leaving, and then you have all these inside Red Bull sources saying that he wasn't really involved with the car, and Pierre Wache is the real genius, and you're like, well, hang on a minute, because Newey must have seen the writing on the wall and must have gone, yeah, this is gonna go badly, and I'm out of here. Uh, yeah, and I think the Christian Horner controversy probably prompted his decision to go, yeah, okay, let's bail. This is a disaster, and yeah, it's now Pierre Wache doesn't look like a genius at the moment. He could obviously turn this car around, and obviously there's the big TD coming in at Spain, which might change things. We don't know, and we'll see how it all plays out. But yeah, Marshall, what are your general thoughts about Liam in this situation? Like, do you feel sorry for him, or are you just like, nah, you chose
I
to go
mean,
there?
I feel stupid because I said he was going to do well. But at the same time, like I thought, like I still think he's a good driver. I don't feel bad for him because I never feel bad for a guy who's in Formula One. Like there are first world problems and then there are first world problems, you know? Um, I'm never gonna really feel terrible for, a Formula One driver who gets to do that for a living. That's pretty cool. But I do feel kind of like it's not his fault. Um, I know a lot of people I like his cocky attitude. I know that some people don't. I find that they find him a little off-putting. I like it because I kind of like the idea of like the old style sort of um just needle that drivers don't really have anymore. They seem a little like subdued now. They're not, they might get mad at each other um at in terms of like they might get mad at each other in terms of particular incidents, and we have the George and Max feud, which is pretty lame feud, I'm not gonna lie. But it's not like the old days. And I mean, I sound like an old man shaking fists at cloud, but like Montoya and hit or Schumacher versus Villeneuve or Montoya versus the universe, like I like that. Like Liam kind of reminds me of Montoya in a certain way, and I always enjoyed Juan Pablo in Formula One. I found that he added a lot just by being different. If everybody has the same personality, it gets really boring. You want to have different personalities who behave in different ways. And I would also say too, like when people say, "Oh, he said that comment about, oh yeah, well I'm faster than Yuki anyway." Well, what do you expect him to say? He's been rewarded for this cocky attitude by Red Bull since he got in the family there, right? Like he was seeing off Perez last year in a V carb, and every time he would whine and complain about him on the radio and slag him off in the interviews, and Red Bull loved that enough to give him the promotion. So he's just sort of projecting what he feels they want to hear and what he thinks that Red Bull identifies as sort of strength, right? Or what they're looking for in a second driver. So you can't really take that at face value. I'm sure that, Yuki and him are not, are in full understanding of the game. And I'm sure that, while they're rivals, it's all sort of um, part of the show, right? I don't want to hold it against him. Like I see people getting mad at him for saying these things, and it's like, yeah, but this is a situation that was created by Red Bull. And this is a situation that he didn't have any control over who they picked. And if you get offered a job, you're going to take that job. So no fault to him for taking it, but I do fault Red Bull for bailing on it after two races because if you do that after two races, like it's not that Liam messed up, it's that you messed up, You're not even giving him a chance at a track that he knows, and you're not even getting to the technical directive itself where things are supposed to change. So, we thought that Flavio was being mean to Jack Doohan.
I know,
and
right? Jesus.
and here's Jack, and here's already a demotion for poor Liam. So it's
Oh,
it's
mate.
it's very it's funny because it's drama. It's funny
Yeah.
because it's like it's so Formula One, right? It's so Formula One. It's like manufactured drama by the team that loves to create its own drama. So in a way, they're happy the story's about them, even though they're not in the race for the championship. It looks like this year
I, s-
they're dominating the headlines with this stuff. Like
uh,
they're
I,
loving it.
I saw a tweet. I can't remember who posted it, but somebody said, Red Bull need their own Drive to Survive spin-off because literally it's just a cinematic masterpiece everywhere you look with them, like or a sitcom depending on how you wish to view it. But yeah, like a Drive to Survive Red Bull's focused spin-off. Yeah, it's not ideal. Yeah, I mean,
What's that going to be called? Something to do with Horner and Marco?
yeah, Christian and Helmet's cavalcade of nonsense or something like.
The helmet and the hornies.
Jeez. I mean, here's my take on all of this is that I felt like Red Bull looked at the two drivers and felt that Liam probably had a higher ceiling, which I agree with. I think he does have a higher ceiling, but with the nature of the car that Red Bull have, you need an experienced F1 driver, not just a good driver. You need an experienced F1 driver, and that's what Yuki is. He's been in that Red Bull system for 4 years. He has a good understanding of how Red Bull machinery should work, or at least have a decent enough understanding that he can get it to work. Whereas Liam has only had 11 races, and his feedback perhaps would have been struggling a little bit. Whereas Yuki apparently, when he did the postseason test, really impressed the engineers with his feedback because I feel like F1 feedback will be very specific compared to, I mean, each series will have their own specifics that you can only really talk about in each series. You think with F1, with how sophisticated it's got, you need that experience to be able to give good feedback. And that's maybe they've looked at it and gone, actually, Yuki's the man for right now, plus the 10 million that they're allegedly getting from Honda. And maybe Liam's the guy that we can use in the future, but kind of you've already burnt that bridge after two races, which is just ridiculous. Also, given the fact that he's driven at two tracks he does not know. He's never driven Albert Park. He's never driven Shanghai. They should have given him at least Suzuka to show himself because he knows that track really well. But instead, they've decided to make the decision. They've decided to go with the publicity friendly option, which is put Japanese driver into your car at Japanese Grand Prix with
Which the
their.
cynic would say is them realizing that this is an intractable situation and you might as well go with the commercially favorable option.
No, of course. Yeah. I mean, can you blame him? No, you can't.
But I mean, I feel bad for Yuki if that's the case,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
because is he going to do any better at Red Bull? I mean, then I guess Checo's still the barometer, right?
I think Yuki will do better than Liam is doing currently, or has done currently, as because of the fact that he has experience. Now, his bar is so low. Get yourself into Q2. You are golden. Can you?
I want Yuki to succeed. I
Oh, of
want
course.
Yuki to get in there. I want Yuki to get in there and throw the middle finger up at Horner and everyone else, and just be like, I have been the person that was supposed to be in this seat, and I can drive an undrivable car.
I
I want him to be able to do that.
I remember when he was signed in 2021, or for 2021, everyone was making the joke, how long until he's in the Red Bull seat? It's taken a bit longer than we're all expecting, but there he is.
So who gets more credit if both Liam and Yuki make Q3 in Suzuka?
Yuki,
Oh, dude,
100%.
Yuki, hands down. How's
Yeah,
that a
yeah,
question? Yuki easily. I
yeah.
mean,
So like Yuki drives the undrivable Red Bull into Q3, whereas
yeah,
Liam is kind of going, well, Yuki was getting it into Q3 pretty
yeah.
every session.
And he was getting it into the top seven
Yeah,
easily.
yeah.
So, like, that's if Liam is as good as he is, he should at the bare minimum be getting into Q3 at 10th and finishing the race in 10th. At the bare minimum, if
Yeah.
he is as good as he is, that is the type of performances he should be coming up. And he should be beating Isaac Hajar.
Yeah, and he's done that. If you remember in Austin last year, he inherited Daniel Ricciardo's penalty,
Yeah,
set a qualifying time faster than the one that Yuki set, because he only qualified in Q1. He didn't qualify
yeah,
in Q2. His time was faster than the time that Yuki set. He then went from the back of the field all the way up to P9, beating
yeah,
Yuki in the process. If
yeah,
that doesn't show you that this kid has got skills,
yeah,
and also the fact that he went to Super Formula and did incredibly well, went to
yeah.
DTM and destroyed Alex Albon, like, and Alex Albon isn't exactly a bad peddler. It's
No,
yeah, Liam's got the skills. He was just given this opportunity far too early,
too early. Way
and
too early.
and instead of Red Bull deciding to, try and support him and make him better and empower him, they've just gone, "Oh, you're a failure," out after two races. And my next question, and AJ, I'll level you this one at you first. Where does this leave Horner? Because surely his position is under threat, if not untenable now at
For
this
the love
stage.
of God, out of the job tomorrow, please. I would be the happiest person alive to see Horner out of a job, out of the business. I do not want to see him anymore. Him and Marco have no business in F1. Initially, you have all the stuff off track. You have their personalities, which I am very clearly not a fan of. But on top of that, to be making blunder after blunder on your second seat and to have not learned anything since Gasly days, come on, man, you got to get your act together. You've been doing this for a good 5, 6 years now.
Yeah.
What winning sort of team principle are you if you're consistently doing this? Just out of a job. He's an egomaniac out there who relies on Max.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think his position is untenable. I mean, Marshall, I leveled this one at you. Look at his record, like in the last couple of years. Like, yes, he's won four straight drivers' championships. Okay, fair enough. But you sign Checo Perez to a new contract, which then goes badly wrong, and it goes so wrong that you then have to cancel his contract, that contract extension you gave him, to the tune of millions of dollars, and then you sign Liam Lawson, which okay, risky decision. I think it was a risk whoever you went with because you're throwing them up against Max Verstappen. But you then get rid of him after two races, which by Red Bull standards is harsh. Like, yeah, can you see a way through this for Christian Horner, or is he just going to keep going?
So are you forgetting that Daniel Kvyat, Alex Albon, and Pierre Gasly exist as well?
Yeah,
Because
I'm just talking like last 18 months
yeah, but
or last year, really.
this is the way that Red Bull has operated since they came into Formula One in 2005. Because they couldn't decide whether they wanted to give Liuzzi or Christian Klein the seat. So they just split it and kept like bringing them in, bringing them out, bringing them in, bringing them out. And I think between those two teams, there's only a handful of seasons where there hasn't been a swap at some point. like at least like definitely less than half of the seasons between where Red Bull and Toro Rosso or whatever the iteration is have kept the same lineup for the entire year, and it's just constant flipping between different options, and it's very much on brand for them. And they notoriously don't have patience. And I don't think you can pin driver decisions on Christian exclusively when Helmut is there
Yeah,
as the
yeah.
driver guy. And like they admitted, I mean, if failure mattered in terms of who was working for Red Bull, then they would have been fired a long time ago because they admitted in 2020 when they hired Checo that their driver development program was a failure because they couldn't get a driver to go in that seat up against Max Verstappen from 20 ever since Daniel left. They could not get a driver in that seat that could give them any sort of form of result that would be um, worthy of, keeping someone around. And then they got Checo, and he was fine for a few years, a couple years, and then it started to fall apart. And then all of a sudden, he looked just like Gasly and Albon did. So, we talk about, are you going to keep Christian around? Are you going to keep Helmut around? Like, I just kind of feel like they're the furniture there. They're as much a foundation as the fizzy drink that's on the side of the car. Like
But
they are the
when does enough become enough? Like, I mean,
I
ignoring all the off-track stuff, like this is mismanagement. Yeah, and they could potentially let their prized asset walk out the door. They
well let's
just about had a plan when Vettel left because Ricardo had
you
established himself.
you make it sound like Red Bull's never faced adversity before. Like look at their 2015, 2016 seasons and
But they weren't great. No.
no, like they've been here before and they managed to just project their failure onto Renault and and mitigating circumstances, flip around drivers like until the day that I see the breaking news graphic for F1 with Christian Horner fired, I'm not gonna believe he's ever going anywhere. Like
Yeah.
he's just ingrained as much as like he is Red Bull at this point, and succeed or fail, it doesn't seem to matter. And like Helmet is just like I saw people on threads like or one person specifically that kind of blew up and went everywhere and became like the narrative of the day trying to defend um uh Helmut Marko, and his argument was, oh, he was a really successful driver. And I'm like, yeah, in the 70s. In the 70s. How much has this sport changed?
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I respect the heck out of anyone who drove in the 70s because every time you got in the car, you were a good candidate to get hurt or die. And of course, the guy lost an eye racing, so obviously he knows a thing or two about risk, but that's not here nor there in the year 2025. That was 50 years ago. 50.
Yeah.
Like the psychology of racing, the technology, like there are very few, if any, similarities. So the credit of what he gets for his, racing record back then, sure, you can't take any of that away from him. That doesn't make him a good judge of talent or a good manager now. It's not relevant. It's a totally different thing. You can respect his performance as a racing driver 50 years ago, but I mean, as we've seen, the guy is kind of out of touch with the modern era, I think it's safe to say.
I feel like he's got lucky with finding two generational talents in Seb and Max. And yeah, he's made a lot of career, like sort of started a lot of careers. If you think how many of the drivers on the grid have had Red Bull connections at some point, but how many of them have actually turned out to be any good, other than Max and Seb, Danny? But
Science is decent.
but when I say that, I mean those guys have gone away from the Red Bull environment and
Oh yeah,
thrived.
yeah.
Yeah, like Sainz had to leave to become better. Gasly, okay, got the win. And I think he's sort of a half on that list, but kind of did it in spite of the system, I feel. But he's gone to Alpine and thrived again, been superb.
Mhm.
And then you've got trying to think who else. Looking up and
Albon.
down. Albon, yes, Albon is the other one I was thinking of. Yeah. So I mean, Liam, I think will probably sit in that Racing Bull. He might try and get back to the full Red Bull team at some point. I would advise him against it. Maybe he could go to Cadillac. You never know. It could be a good pickup for them.
I think
Uh,
10 drivers are driving for Cadillac next year.
oh, yeah, who knows at this point? But
With everybody's like wish list, it seems like, everybody's driving for Cadillac next year.
let's not forget that Fly did say that Carlos Sainz would be driving for Cadillac next year. So that'll be an interesting one if that ever did come off. But yeah, so obviously it's a big change. It's two races. Just final question is, what are your expectations for Yuki, and what would you consider to be a success for him?
I mean, like like we just said, like AJ just said, the bar is so low. Like getting out of Q1 is going to be a success for him. Like performing as well as Checo did at the end of last year is all you can expect. Um, but what I expect, I don't even know anymore, man. Like I'm done guessing with the Red Bull second seat. It's like just when you think it can't get any worse, it turns into Luca Badoer at Ferrari 2009.
Oh God, don't remind me.
Like that's what this reminded me of. This two race stint reminded me um of Luca Badoer and Giancarlo Fisichella filling in for Massa in
On
2009.
Andre
And
Lotterer.
it reminded me of Jacques Villeneuve replacing Trulli at Renault for a couple races in '04. And I say that painfully as a Villeneuve fan,
Yeah, man.
but it reminded me of that. Just like those situations where a driver comes in as a sub and it just, you think they've got nothing to lose. And then you're like, oh, they can still lose. Like,
Yeah.
you're just like, oh, well, what, oh, he's going to hop in that Renault that Alonso is doing really well in. How bad can it? Oh, it can go really bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I have a question for you, Baxty, and I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I have a question for you. I put a thread out there yesterday or the day before that blew up for my standards, where I said we all owe Checo Perez an apology. And I think I got a ton of likes on it, but I also got a lot of heat for people like, absolutely not. Checo had his chance. And, some people were getting really rude about it. Others were like, I always believed in Checo. And I'm going to say, like, I love Checo. I thought he was great, but I did lose faith at certain points in him. Like, at certain points, I was like, come on, Checo, man, just do something. Like, poke him with a stick and wake him up, But I did lose faith in him. And then I'm sitting here watching Liam in the first two races, and I feel like, Checo, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I lost faith in you. What do you feel like? Do you feel like we owe Checo an apology?
No, I don't think so.
No.
Like I mean, it's clear that there were bigger problems than him. But he still didn't deliver the best results, really, did he? I mean, it's it's a difficult one. It is a difficult one. I think Red Bull, they made a decision in getting rid of him, which I think was the right one, because ultimately he cost them the Constructors' Championship last year. Whereas they then made the incorrect decision in hiring a guy with 11 race starts and had never done a full season in Formula One. And I think, yes, okay, as I said earlier, it's because he had the higher ceiling, but he needed more time to develop with a junior team to then get that shot rather than just chucking him in at the deep end, sink or swim, and he sank spectacularly. So I don't think,
But you can only say that if Yuki performs well. If Yuki
well,
performs poorly, then you can say keeping Checo might have been the right move.
I mean, to be honest with you, if Yuki sinks, then I think whoever you put in that second seat is going to struggle unless his name is Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso. Um, Probably that's about it. I'd still think Norris and Russell and Piastri would probably struggle. Maybe not to the extent that Liam has struggled, but they wouldn't be anywhere near Max, I don't think.
I think the PR problem was like Perez had been established as the baseline, and the only way for him to redeem himself is someone else driving that seat. But once they do, you can kind of feel like maybe he should have stayed. It's just if he had stayed, then you wouldn't have known how bad the other guy would be. It's one of those catch-22 situations.
Absolutely, and he will be feeling vindicated. I feel
He will. He
wherever he
will.
is, and if he can then take that to a
On a
negotiation with
beach in
Cadillac.
Mexico somewhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I'm afraid I must bring this to a close. That has been episode 2 of Shifting Happens Pit Stop, your quick hit stuff for anything related. We've, of course, been talking about Liam Lawson being dropped from Red Bull for Yuki Tsunoda. If you have enjoyed this, then please do let us know in the comments, and also let us know by liking the video and subscribing. That has been Marshall. Big thank you to AJ, who we did lose to some technical problems. That's the joy of live recording. And until next time, guys, stay safe, and I shall speak to you all very, very soon.